Hi there. What's the real difference between alternate realities and parallel realities? This isn't just a philosophical mind puzzle. This pivotal question profoundly impacts our understanding of the human experience. And before the end of this video, you will not only understand the difference, but will also learn how to leverage this knowledge to navigate from one dimension to another. A prerequisite for predictable manifestation, believe it or not. I am Ijoma Oputa, the torchbearer of reflection. I guide people from pain to peace by revealing through mirror portals the limitless self within. So, what is the real difference between alternate and parallel realities? And why is this such a big deal? According to my great-grandfather, who was asked this question during a rare international conference of secret orders, the difference between them was that their positions were different on the universal grid of realities, the fourth dimensional plane. Alternative realities, he explained, comprised events in the past, present, and future on multiple timelines, each one reflecting a different path one could have taken in the past, a present experience, and a future consequence of both of these events. While parallel realities, he explained, existed only in the present across these same timelines. Why is this important? Pay attention. For he went on to further explain that knowledge of this distinction was the key to accessing these alternate timelines and controlling one's reality. A journey, of course, he claimed he had made quite often. Now, everybody was impressed with this response, and participants further solicited his permission to travel with them to Europe and offer guidance and instruction in this emerging field at the time of dimensional navigation. He, of course, respectfully declined, considering the fact that he was a ruler of his people, and at that time, his absence would have been catastrophic. And of course, he wouldn't allow himself to be made a public spectacle. An alternative proposition was instead made, therefore. A private circle within the assembly proposed to import a prototype device, a machine said to have been developed using early principles of electromagnetic field manipulation and perceptual displacement. They offered to bring it to the local Governor General's office, which at the time was the equivalent of an embassy during the colonial times in Nigeria, so that he may examine it himself and determine whether it had merit or was merely a crude imitation of truths long known to the initiated. He accepted this invitation, but at the time was already well aware of the duplicitous nature of the colonial administrations. So while he agreed to inspect the prototype, he offered only limited assistance, just enough to validate the device's premise, but not enough to unlock its deeper function. He believed and often repeated that sacred knowledge, when misused or misunderstood, could unravel the very fabric of a society faster than it could elevate it. And so, like many of the mystics before him, he chose guardianship over glory. He chose silence over spectacle. He chose to preserve what the world was not ready to receive. It was this limited collaboration, however, that made the invention of this device possible. Then, World War II began. The Allied forces were under siege, pressured not only by manpower, and terrain, but by the rapid and disturbing advancements in Axis weaponry. Among them, the Furiball aerial weapons system, and also the notorious Die Glocke. The Bell, a device shrouded in secrecy, rumored to distort space, time, and harness anti-gravitational forces of the universe. With this turn of events, permission was given to my grandfather, my great-grandfather's son, to further reveal elements of multi-dimensional navigation, a discipline hidden for centuries in the simple, believe it or not, game of chess. This was handed down for generations, directly from the 6th century Indian origins of chess called Chaturanga. Chaturanga was adopted as a mere game in Europe in the 15th century as today's everyday chess, but its mystical, hidden, transdimensional messages, the messages that distinctively delineate the difference between alternative and parallel realities, were hidden in the Islamic world and forgotten until now. The juxtaposition of a dimensional board upon a regular chessboard. That's where the secrets were revealed. Not only did it illustrate the long misunderstood distinction between parallel and alternative realities, it also exposed the access points, the precise coordinates through which a conscious being could shift from one dimension to another. This breakthrough, this hidden framework, is yet another legacy of the Order of Unified Resplendence, a lineage of guardians who preserved truth through simplicity and concealed power in the ordinary. And today, with this simple replica that I've created, you will see it for yourself. I will reveal and demonstrate how to identify, distinguish, and access these realities, not with theory, but with pattern, not with guesswork, but with ancient encoded wisdom. So, join me, and let's begin. This pawn represents you at the present moment. Now observe carefully. As a pawn, your movement is restricted. You advance only one step at a time, and only forward along this single timeline, passing through different squares of reality as time passes by. These squares behind you, these represent your past, and the first one symbolizes the reality in the beginning, the moment you were born. The squares far up ahead, the one at the very end, that represents the end of a linear life. And if nothing changes, if no opportunity presents itself, if no strategy is engaged, if no conscious decision is made to change one's life, then the pawn simply follows this one narrow path, just like most people do. They wake up, repeat the same routines, follow the same fears, stay in the same job, have the same habits, the same relationships until time runs out. They live out their days as pawns, not because they lack power, but because they were never shown how to deviate from the timeline they were born in. They never discover that this rigid timeline is not the only path. There are other opportunities. Let's take another look. Let's watch now what happens when the shadow enters the equation. When you adhere to a different concept of yourself, one that's at variance with absolute truth, you transform from a pawn into the dark knight. Now, this isn't a noble knight like you might imagine. This is a persona, a fragmented identity born from pain, shame, and survival. Its movement on the board is unusual and erratic. It focuses on the past, has unpredictable ways, not with purpose, but with chaos. Look at these smaller dots. These shaded dots that appear across the board. Each one represents a diminished possibility. A life shaped not by your true nature, but by fear, confusion, and false identity. And when you adhere to these false narratives, you shift into realities that correspond with those. These are alternate realities, brought to life not by design, but by your misunderstanding of the limitless self. In this state, the dark night constantly shifts between regret over the past and fear of the future. Never present, never whole. It dwells on mistakes, it loops old wounds, and in doing so, it unintentionally manifests more failure, more misfortune, more fragmentation, a life of reactive motion, never conscious creation. But when you learn the power of observation, true observation, through the use of mirror portals, everything changes. But not the observation of the ego, but the perspective of God Himself. And when that divine lens becomes your own, your transformation again occurs. You now become, let's take another look at the board. You now transform from the night, you become the rook. Unlike the dark night, the rook does not stumble through timelines. It slides cleanly across parallel iterations of reality along this exact point in time. The rook does not move backward in this case, in regret, neither does it move forward in anxious projection. It moves with respect to this dimension board now across horizontal timelines and all the realities in this present moment that coexist right now. This means that through the mirror portals, you can gain access to different superimposed versions of yourself. Versions that already exist, but have been waiting for you to see through the illusion of who you are not. This is why the quantum box is so effective. It doesn't take 30 days. It shifts you out of the darkness, out of false identity, out of the looping, and out of mistakes, into the light, across parallel realities, and into the one where peace, power, and clarity already exist. And it doesn't do it later. It does it right now. Now let's take another look. These diamond-studded versions of reality, shimmering across the present, past, and future, they too represent alternative realities. But unlike the shadowy squares of fear and limitation, these are realities born of success, joy, and fulfillment. They also comprise deep satisfaction. These are the realities where your dreams come true. And if you've ever heard the phrase, when you change your personality, you change your personal reality, a truth often echoed by Dr. Joe Dispenza, you now understand why. Because when you shift who you believe you are, you shift where you exist. You move across the scale of personal versions of yourself, from the dim echoes of false identity into the radiant spectrum of your authentic divine self. And once you've crossed that threshold, your new timeline unfolds inside the field of dreams. And this is represented, let's take another look. And this is represented here by these diamond-gilded realities. And it is here in this field that your final transformation takes place. You become not the rook, but the king or queen of your dimensions. You're no longer restricted by time, identity, or strategy. You now move freely across the board in all directions, through all timelines, into any reality you claim. You are no longer reacting to life. You are now creating it. And from this vantage point, your wildest dreams are not only possible, they are inevitable. To help you take this journey into your own hands, I've created a simple yet powerful tool. I have a link where you can download a free copy of the Dimension Board. This Dimension Board that I just described. This isn't just a diagram, it's a map of your personal evolution, or rather, revelation. An expedition into the fourth dimension. And on this board, you'll be able to clearly study the distinction between parallel and alternate realities. You'll see exactly where you are right now and what's possible across the spectrum of your existence. It also outlines the techniques and transitions you need to move from pawn to rook, or from knights to king or queen, each reflecting a profound shift in identity and perception. And as an added bonus, this chart will also show you how to reach back into the past, into your dark past, not to relive it, but to adjust it, to transform it into a sparkling alternative and reposition yourself for glorious future experiences. This is your mirror, your portal. This is your invitation to transcend. Now, if you like how this sounds, remember to like, subscribe, and share, for you would be remiss in your duties as a child of the light if you kept this information to yourself, especially since nowhere else on earth or in the universe can you gain such valuable insight. Be sure to book also a one-on-one call with me so that I may assess where exactly you stand on this dimension board and develop with you a plan to transform into the glorious sovereign of your reality, sliding blissfully across parallel realities and positioning yourself to reign across the alternative kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Peace and blessings.